Okay, so in this video we're doing the build of the CinemAh frame from NewBeeDrone. So I did a frame review and build of this frame a while back, and so if you want to see how it was put together, the parts review, etc., I'll link that video down in the video description. But for the most part, I'm going to just put this together in this video. Shouldn't take too long. I know there's been some other build videos out there. They've done their builds in a different way. Then you're probably going to see it in mine. Mine's kind of I would characterize it as an easier build, less parts, less stuff to kind of mess up. At the same time, there's obviously some pros and cons to the way I've decided to put this together, so you probably want to keep that in mind. But check out that video on the frame if you want to see how it's put together. So for building out the rest of it, I think the easiest thing to do is to build the frame. As you see here, it's completely built. And then just take out the center piece here. This is the last part that you're going to put in. And so there's only 6 screws to remove. So these 3 here and these 3 here, so 6 total. So, or what you can do is just build the frame and just don't do the last part. Don't put these 2 center braces in, and then go ahead and put the build together, and then you put these 2 center braces in at the very end, is what I'm going to do. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and take the center part out, and then as you can see, I got all the parts laid out already. I've kind of pre-planned this build, so actually this is a pretty straightforward build, really. It's actually not that difficult, at least for me. For someone that's brand new, it might be a little more difficult, but I've chosen some parts here in the way I put this together so it's a little easier to sort of assemble. So I have here a Beta FPV 35 amp all-in-one flight controller. It's a whip style board with some 35 amp ESDs and F411. I have a Express LRS 2.4 gigahertz Beta FPV receiver here, and it's already soldered on, so you can see these solder points there on UART1. I have this little plug here off on UART2, so let me flip it over here so probably you can see the writing. And so that's UART2, and that's for the DJI Vista. And I have it unplugged here, so I kind of pre-planned this. So I'll mount this first into the frame, and I'm going to have this kind of mounted in an unusual way. I'll have to do some flipping and motor remapping, etc. I'll explain that a little bit later in the video. But this is going to go in first, and then the XD30 is going to pop out the top for the battery. But for this part here, it's going to be pretty simple. You have a flight controller, a ESD all-in-one board, and all you got to do is solder on your receiver. Could be Crossfire, Express LRS, etc. S-Bus receiver, and then you need a plug here for your DJI system. If you're doing analog, obviously this build video is not going to help you. It's going to be a little bit different. And then you solder on your XD30 here at the back. So that's all I did for this part here. This is the main stack or the electronics. And then once I have the flight controller mounted in the frame, I'll go ahead and I'll install my Vista system with the DJI Vista camera. See, it's already pretty much all ready to go here. I've got the camera or the antenna, and then this little antenna piece here with the M2 standoff is for holding the antenna in the back of the frame. So you just put it on like this, and you need a zip tie here to hold it together so it doesn't slide around. But that's there's no soldering here except for this other end of the plug here. So I just have the 4 wires for the Vista to power, ground, and TX and RX. I'm not using S-Bus on here because I have a Express LRS receiver, and then this is the other end of the plug that goes into. So it should make that part of the build pretty easy. And I'm just going to use a couple of zip ties to mount the Vista. So nothing too fancy there. And then the motors I'm going to be using here are these RCN Power 2104 3000 kV light motors. I think I showed this in a previous video. So the new GTS V3 series with a T-style mount or T-mount mount, and we have pretty nice copper windings. A very nice smooth motor, smooth bearings, plenty of motor wire here. This is going to go on last because you have to kind of once you got the flight controller mounted in here, you have to sort of mount the motor and then sort of route your motor wires onto these little carbon pieces. Probably use some tape to hold it on, and then route it towards the solder points that are going to be on the flight controller. As you can see, I'm using the whoop style flight controller, so it's going to be in that sort of diamond shaped angle here instead of the 20 by 20 or the 30 by 30 holes there. So one thing to know about using the whoop style flight controllers on this frame is if you have you have to be aware of where the standoffs are, or where the side plates go into the top plate. The USB port might be blocked if you have it in a certain orientation. So for me, I have it rotated so that the USB port is going to come out in a way that it's not going to be blocked. So you have to keep that in mind and when you're planning your build out and where the XD30 is going to come out. So I'll show you that here a little bit later in the video. Okay, so this is how we got the all-in-one flight controller mounted and the Vista mounted, and how I've routed all of my cables. First off, the board is inverted, obviously, because now we're upside down, but this is the top of the board, and the front of the board is over here, which is going out the left side. So you'll have to do a board orientation rotation as well as motor remapping. I will link the CLI dump in the video description if you want details on how to do that. It'll be in there, but basically if you copy the settings, that will get the board and the motors in the correct order, and of course you have to change the motor direction to match whatever the direction of your prop is. That's also separate. But I routed the wire that goes from the Vista to the camera under the board here. So it goes from here under the board, comes out over here. I got your Express Solaris receiver going to be behind the camera here in this little space. And then I routed the XD30 in this direction, which is on the right side of the quad. This is upside down, of course. And I'm going to have it pop out of this hole over here. And that's, I thought I was going to put it maybe here in the back in this hole, but I didn't want to block this hole in case I wanted some batteries that are going to be a little longer. So I decided to put the XD30 out this way. Also, the USB port is over here so that it's not going to get blocked. So you can still plug in your USB cables. So then I routed the cable that's soldered onto the back of the Vista under the flight controller here, pops out over here, and then I just plugged it in over here. So that's pretty much it. Used a couple of zip ties to hold in the Vista, and then I'll just put the two side plates on, screwed on the M2 screws for the standoff to hold the antenna, and also screw in the camera. And that's pretty much it for the center stack part here, and then I'll have to, of course, mount the motors, tape the motor wires, and then solder it to the flight controller. And I think I'll probably do that first before I put the side plates back on. I think that'll be easier. Alright, so I got the motors installed. I just used 2 screws. This is kind of a design flaw with this little TPU part here. It makes the screw go in at an angle, so probably best is to try and thread a little bit of one side and then thread a little bit more on the other side and go back and forth. Otherwise, you'll find that the other screw won't go in, and then you can tighten it down, and that'll kind of straighten the screw out. You can see here, there's this gap. I don't think they designed this TPU part correctly. It should be a little bit longer, or sure, it shouldn't bend. It's not the right size, basically, so it causes the screw to go in kind of at an angle. It does, I mean, the motor will mount. It's just that it's a little bit difficult. So I cut all the wires to length to match the frame. They're shorter in the front than in the back. Use some tape here to hold the motor wire to the frame. And then I routed the wires so that they avoided the side plates. They're going to go into these notches here. So you make sure you don't cover those up. Otherwise you're going to have a problem later. And you have enough wire slack for everything. That's pretty much it. The wires obviously are longer for the 2 back motors because the all-in-one's over here. A little bit longer there. And I'm routing the receiver kind of in this little space here, and the camera goes in front. Not a whole lot there, so pretty... Actually, overall, this is always a little bit of finicky install, not difficult, just you want to measure everything. Measure twice, cut once, and not a whole lot of soldering because I'm using an all-in-one board and not two, like a two stack, like a flight controller and an AC separate 2 boards. That would actually make the build a little bit difficult. So for this one, I think that going with an all-in-one make it a little bit easier. So at this point, just got to put the two side plates back on, and then screw in the camera. Screw in this back antenna piece here with the standoff, and I think that'll be it. Okay, so I'm pretty much done here. I just got to put the props on. I got the GoPro mount there. I have the XD30 coming up this little hole right here. And you want to make sure that it's not in the way of the props. And it's routed it like that. Got the two side plates on. Got the antenna screwed in the back here with that standoff. I have the receiver antenna in these two holes here, like this, and just kind of move around a little bit, but it's out of the way of the props and it should be fine. Right behind the camera. And yeah, everything's nice and tidy, nice and neat. So I just basically, did some soldering ahead of time. Just sort of planned out the build ahead of time. And really the only thing that took the most time was soldering the motor wires up. Just routing those through to make sure there's enough slack in there to route around. And make sure you route around these side plates here. You gotta account for that, so you have to have a little bit of slack for that. But you don't want too much so that it gets caught in the props. You gotta get out, make sure it's out of the way here, so it's just pretty much just right. And that's the whole thing, except for I gotta put the props on. Let's see how much it weighs. Alright, so it's coming in at 189 grams. And let's put the props on here. I'm not going to mount them yet, but put them on here just for the weight. A little over 200, like 201.7, 201.8 grams. And then, as you can see, I'm using the hooks on the side, on the carbon plates. So I'm using some rubber bands here for the battery. And I'm using the sticky pad here. I'm going to remove that plastic cover. Stick the batteries on the back. They'll probably use like a 4S850 since these are 2104 3000 kV motors on 3-inch props. So I think a 4S850 should be good. Just for comparison, this is the HGLRC Veyron 30 CR, and this one's coming in, this is analog by the way, not digital. It's coming in at 248 grams. So let me see if I can put it on like this. There you go. Now you can see how much it weighs, 248.5, 248.5 grams. And these are 2004 motors, and it is analog, so bit on the heavier side. Yeah, so, if you're looking for a lighter 3-inch Cinewhoop build, this is definitely about 50 grams lighter compared to the analog, and this is digital. Let's see how it flies. That'll be in the next video. So that's going to do it for this one. Got any questions for the next one, let me know, and I'll try and answer them in the next video. Talk to you guys later.